Hello, ladies and gentlemen. 2 days have passed since the latest Nintendo Direct. And in fact, it was only 2 days ago that myself and my colleague, Mr. Street, live streamed our reactions to the entire thing over on my secondary channel, Top Hat Chat. So, if you would like to subscribe over there, then I would suggest you hit the subscriber button on that very channel. That'd be lovely. Then you'll get even more of me in your face than ever before, if of course you are into that sort of thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be discussing something what appeared in that Direct. And that is, of course, The Legend of Zelda Links Awakening, the bloody remake they currently have in the works. And more importantly, is that game on the ugly side, if you will. Some people often seem to say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but personally I do not think that is always the case. I think beauty and ugliness can often be considered slightly less objective. Like, let's take modern art for example. Art is beautiful in many cases, but the majority of modern art is made specifically to be ugly, to get a reaction. Whereas all the greatest pieces of art from way back when were all about beauty, wasn't they? Like when Leonardo da Vinci painted the Sistine Chapel. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is pod racing compared to all of the modern day Banksy rubbish we get today. Ugh. And speaking of Banksy rubbish, that's kind of how I feel about the latest Zelda game. It looks like it's trying to make a statement rather than trying to be purposely beautiful like many of the Zelda games we've got from the past. Let's take the original Legend of Zelda Links Awakening on the Game Boy just as an example. Well, not really even as an example, it is the very subject of the video. The game itself was made as a hardware pusher for the Game Boy at the time. It was the biggest and best Game Boy game would ever be created, both in terms of size, scope and graphics. It was a masterpiece for its day. And if you're going to remake such a game, surely you should go one of two ways. Well, personally, that's what I feel they should have done. One, either make it a hardware pusher on the Nintendo Switch, or go the other route and make it more inspired based on the original game, which kind of looked like the way they were heading when we first saw the game in the Direct. If you remember, it starts out by showing an anime cutscene exactly like what they show in the original game on the Game Boy, and the art style, etc., kind of looks very similar, and so it's like a progressed, vastly improved version from what we got on the Game Boy. So that's what you want from a remake, isn't it? It's a vastly improved version. But then we get to the main game, and for some reason Link is looking worse than he has perhaps ever looked at any period in time ever before. So you've gone from this quite attractive anime Link to suddenly a Link in the game itself which looks completely different from the cutscene and doesn't relate whatsoever for some very bizarre reason indeed. This new Link looks like Bomberman for some reason, or even somewhat, I would say, of a Lego figurine, or figurine, yes, or something like that. It just doesn't look that aesthetically appealing. So why did they decide to go with such a strange art direction? When you look at the world in the game, there's nothing what looks particularly wrong with it, although it does kind of have a plasticky sort of feel to it, or look to it more than the feel. But this plasticky look goes with the Lego looking character, I suppose. So why have they chosen to make this such bizarre character design choice? Because when you look back at other Links, there seems to be logic behind for sometimes what appears to be madness. Like, let's take Link from Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker. There was many people absolutely reeling at the time with the change in art direction. However, I was on board with it from day one because there was a big logical reason as to why they had chosen to go that route. And firstly, that was because the character could display so many emotions on his face, as he had such huge eyes, a huge mouth, etc. So he could show more emotion than perhaps any gaming character placed in any game in history prior to that point. and the cel shaded graphics just added to the overall game and gave it a timeless look. Hence why the HD update was so easy to just re-release on the Wii U all those years later with such minimal changes. Whereas with Links Awakening, on the other hand, they have neither decided to make it a graphically amazing looking game like the original one was on the Game Boy, nor have they decided to keep it looking very similar to the original game. They've chosen a new art direction completely. So I was thinking about this art direction even more, and one of the things what I am quite happy about is that it's not exactly the same Link from A Link Between Worlds, which I thought was a great looking Link. I must say, it did look a lot like the Link in which appeared on the box art and in the manual, etc. of the original Link to the Past game. So there was logic behind that one. Personally, in this Links Awakening remake, I would have liked the Link in the game to have looked a lot like the Link, once again, in the box art, the manual, etc. of the original Links Awakening game, or even the Link from the anime cutscene. Like, I would have preferred it if they made the entire game look like a cartoon, because at least that way it's something completely fresh and original, but it still looks great and remains faithful to the original intellectual property. With regards to the Link Between Worlds Link again, and why I'm glad they didn't end up using that Link in this game, because it could have set a negative precedence for the series. It could have ended up going the way of the new Super Mario Bros. Series, where every 2D Mario game is exactly the same in the way it looks. And it would have been horrible to see top-down Zelda games ending up like that. Like, imagine if going forward they made a top-down Zelda game every year or two, and every Link design was the same one from the Link Between Worlds, so it would just become almost like the new Legend of Zelda series. I would not like to see Zelda face the same fate as what's happened to 2D Mario. So I'm pleased in a way they've gone for a different art direction. It's just a rather questionable one, because it's ugly. I can't see how anyone can look at Link's latest character design and go, you know what, that character design's really cool looking, it's really inspired, it's really interesting. Like, what can they actually do with that character? He's got eyes like Bomberman. He's going to struggle to show any real form of emotion because he hasn't got much of a face. And his limbs are all short and squat, so he can't show much emotion with his body movements either. It's such a limited design choice. And as I said, I'm just struggling to get my head around it, really. All I can think about is they're trying to get down with the kids, perhaps, because I know a lot of modern children's cartoons have awful art styles. Like, if you watch most of the content pumped out by the Cartoon Network, for example, nearly all of their cartoons look exactly the same. And once again, the art direction and animation is far worse than the majority of children's programs I grew up watching in the 1980s. Like, you compare anything they've produced to basically the modern incarnation of anything compared to the stuff that was in the 80s. The 80s stuff was far superior. Like, for example, look at the 80s version of She-Ra, then look at the modern day version of She-Ra. There has been a ridiculous degradation in terms of art quality within that franchise. So maybe Nintendo have chosen to do that on purpose. They're trying to make all of their art much worse because children are used to really bad design at the moment. Hence why they play, well, most of the games they're into have really poor art styles, don't they? Like, look at Fortnite, for example. Fortnite graphically doesn't really look any different to Time Splitters on the GameCube, so children aren't really into graphics anymore. And a lot of the other titles they're into do look a bit Lego-y. The Lego series, for example, Minecraft, Roadblocks, they all look like Lego, so it would make sense to make Link look like Lego if they're trying to get a younger demographic in. That's the only logic I can think of why they would purposely choose to make a character look worse than he has ever looked in history. Or maybe I'm just being really negative and I'm no different to all those morons in the early 2000s who thought Toon Link looked awful. I will let you all decide in the comment section, but that's the only upside I can think to this latest version of Link is it's a way to simply get down with the kids. So, let me know your thoughts, as I once said. Also, if you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I have plenty of in-depth videos on this channel which I've put a lot of thought and editing into, unlike this one, which is just a nice little piece of discussion. Yeah. Cheerio!